Burrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts.
Rashard Brooks laid to rest today. Community members pay tribute to the black man fatally shot by police after a routine traffic stop. The hearse carrying his body passing by the Wendy's where he was killed. Brooks was memorialized at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Martin Luther King Jr. once pastored. King's daughter Bernice sharing this message.
Rashard Brooks's life matters. And he should have been able to live to enjoy his family and watch his kids grow up into adulthood.
Disturbing surge. Dr. Anthony Fauci's alarming assessment on the increases in COVID infections across the country. Tonight, the new reporting on where those hotspots are as hospitalizations rise in 21 states, at least a dozen states with a record number of new cases, including Arizona, where the president is tonight. As he contradicts his staff, who claimed his comment about limiting testing was a joke. President Trump saying today, "I don't kid." Protests and the vote. How demonstrations across the country are factoring into elections as a number of states cast ballots today. Breaking news, no charges in the NASCAR noose incident. The Justice Department saying the rope had been there for months. Camille Cosby opens up in a rare interview.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't care what they feel.
The wife of Bill Cosby reacts to the news today about his appeal, why she says she doesn't visit her husband of 56 years, and her message for the young people on the front lines of the Black Lives Matter movement. And the future of the office. Will the great work from home experiment become permanent? Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. This is a moment that will certainly be a defining time in the history books for a number of reasons, not just for the so-called racial reckoning. But today we learned that we are at an especially critical point in the fight to contain the coronavirus. The White House task force says the next couple of weeks are the most important in tamping down the surge in virus cases. According to the latest data, 8 states are now seeing a daily increase in deaths, including Arizona, a state that has seen a 20% increase in hospitalizations. Our Matt Gutman is there and leads us off tonight.
Dr. Anthony Fauci today with a stark warning about the coronavirus.
Right now, the next couple of weeks are going to be critical in our ability to address those surgings that we're seeing in Florida, in Texas, in Arizona, and in other states.
The image is painfully familiar. Doctors and nurses overwhelmed with COVID patients, this time across the Sun Belt. In 21 states, hospitalizations are surging, and in 23 states, the rate of those testing positive is increasing, a sign there's more COVID in the community.
You are now seeing a disturbing surge of infections that looks like it's a combination, but one of the things is an increase in community spread. And that's something that I'm really quite concerned about.
Texas today hitting a record nearly 5,500 cases today. Children's Hospital in Houston now taking adult patients to free up beds in other hospitals. And the governor, who early on resisted issuing a stay-at-home order, now telling KBTX TV that Texans should stay home when possible.
The safest place for you is at your home.
Today in Phoenix, throngs of people, including 3,000 students, packing into this megachurch to see the president. Just a fraction of those lining up outside wearing masks.
The person feels like they don't need to wear a mask. I don't think that they should be forced to wear a mask.
Dr. Sam Durrani told us his hospital system saw a record rise in COVID patients just over the past 24 hours.
You're talking about 10% increases per day, 20% increases in hospital admissions.
So what does that mean for hospitals like yours?
You're going to get to the point where we have overflow, especially in the ICU.
He called today's rally a super spreader event.
But mass gathering at this time is not safe.
Of any kind?
Of any kind.
In Yuma, Arizona, COVID patients being airlifted to other hospitals for acute care. And in Yakima, Washington, hospitals transferring patients also and running short on staff. Doctors juggling emergencies.
We have the difficult choice of, do we send someone away for 8 hours to go across the mountains and back? And that means one less ambulance that's available for a car accident.
And across the country, cases are surging in places like Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where the virus is on the move. 14 students from Ohio testing positive after a trip there. Another 30 visitors diagnosed after returning to West Virginia. And back in Phoenix, despite the warnings, defiance about mask wearing.
I don't wear a mask, even though I have my immune system is a little compromised because I'm a breast cancer survivor.
Wow, and yet she doesn't wear a mask. And Matt Gutman joins us now live with more. Matt, we just heard the concern from one person going to that rally, but overall, were most people concerned about COVID-19, and were they taking any precautions at all?
There were some people taking precautions, Lindsay. It was estimated about 1 to 5% people here were properly wearing masks. But a lot of people seem to take it as a point of pride that they were not worried about wearing masks or taking precautions or catching COVID inside. In fact, one woman who was actually the first person in line told us that she thinks the masks caused the problems. Other people said that it was overblown, that they take vitamins which are protecting them. But by and large, because President Trump has set the tone for that he doesn't need to wear masks, and he seems to have made the point that COVID might be overblown. That is the message that so many people here have picked up upon, and, you know, not many of them wanted to wear a mask. They felt it was an infringement on their freedom.
His supporters following his lead. All right, Matt Gutman, thanks so much for your reporting. Now to the 2020 race, where the country's ongoing protests over race and policing are upending some congressional primaries as protesters demand real change from Washington. Primaries today in Kentucky and New York State will be one of the first electoral tests of the impact of George Floyd's killing and the movement that it sparked. In Kentucky, the Democratic primary race to take on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, it's seeing a remarkable shift in recent weeks, driven in part by those protests. ABC's Mary Bruce has that story.
The people united will never be divided. The people united.
In Kentucky, the movement for racial justice is shaking up the race to take on the most powerful Republican on Capitol Hill, giving a late boost of momentum to an underdog, Democratic State Representative Charles Booker.
I stand before you as your brother, as your cousin, as your neighbor, as your fellow good troublemaker.
He's become a fixture at the protests, his campaign for the U.S. Senate tapping into the energy marching through the streets. Booker even sharing this video of being tear-gassed.
This ain't helping, Mayor. This ain't helping.
Just weeks ago, it seemed the Democratic Party had all but decided on former Marine fighter pilot Amy McGrath as the best candidate to take on the Senate Majority Leader.
Amy McGrath is our candidate. She's a strong candidate. She's giving McConnell a run for his money.
She's Kentucky's best chance to move on from Mitch McConnell.
But aboard Booker's campaign bus, the 35-year-old tells us he's poised to shock the political world.
We know that we can do the work to end poverty and to end injustice and to address the racial and structural inequity that robs so many people of the chance of doing anything more than struggle. And so we're fighting back, and we're showing the country and the world what Kentucky is made of, and I'm fired up.
Just a few weeks ago, Democrats really thought they had this race planned out. What happened?
Kentuckians are used to being ignored. We're used to being counted out. We're used to being written off. People talk about Kentucky. They talk at us. They tell us what we think. They tell us what we believe in. Never listen to us.
The national reckoning on racism has roared through this state, sparked by the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor by Louisville police, and then the killing of George Floyd. For Booker, this fight is deeply personal.
I carry a lot of trauma. I've had cousins murdered the last 4 years. And my cousin TJ was murdered on Easter Sunday in 2016. Was really good friends with Breonna Taylor. And it hurts. It hurts even right now. And I've used that pain.
He says he's lived the struggle most politicians just talk about.
I'm standing with them even when I got hit with tear gas myself. And I think it showed the people of Kentucky that they can support me in my candidacy because they know I'm going to fight for them.
He's surging, gaining endorsements from progressive powerhouses like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren.
I know we're making some noise now. I believe the establishment folks, I believe leadership hears us.
McGrath has the support of top party leaders in Washington, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. And she's raised more than $40 million to take on Mitch McConnell after narrowly losing her bid for a House seat in 2018.
Amy McGrath, the former Marine combat pilot, defeated by the four-term incumbent.
I've been boots on the ground for a year now, almost a year now, talking to my fellow Kentuckians about their frustrations and their concerns and talking about common sense solutions for the future. So we're excited to take this primary on. I'm not particularly a partisan person. I'm somebody that will work with anyone, no matter whether they wear a red jersey or a blue jersey.
But in the midst of this movement, her critics say she's out of touch.
Have you been on the ground in Louisville with the protesters the last 3 days, or in Lexington or elsewhere, Ms. McGrath?
I have not.
And why?
Well, I've been with my family, and I've had some family things going on this past weekend.
Your critics say that you've struggled to respond to this growing movement. What do you make of that criticism?
Well, look, I have been out listening to my fellow Kentuckians. I went to memorial services for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in Central Park in Louisville. And I know that people want to tackle social injustice in this country, the racial injustice. We got to fix this.
Have you been surprised by the momentum around Mr. Booker?
We're living in a time when the racial injustice is being highlighted. And, you know, Mr. Booker, he has his life experience. He has a voice for these things. And I think that that's an important voice. I do believe we need to come together as Democrats to defeat Mitch McConnell.
Both candidates are confident Kentucky is ready to make a change. McConnell has been in office for 35 years.
He was elected 2 weeks after I was born, and he's been screwing us my entire life.
But before they take on McConnell, Kentucky has to get through today's primary. Due to COVID-19, the state today has just one polling site in each county, regardless of size. That's a 95% reduction, sparking concerns about potential voter suppression in large cities with more minorities. Even LeBron James speaking out, tweeting, "This is systemic racism and oppression. So angry, man." The state is also seeing a record number of people voting by mail. Counting all those ballots will take time. Results are not expected for another week.
Today's just been special because it's my first time ever doing it.
Results that may reflect how the country is rising to meet this moment.
And Mary Bruce joins us now, as well as ABC News political director Rick Klein. Mary, you mentioned those concerns about fewer polling places in larger counties. Why did that happen, and how has the voting gone today?
Well, a lot of officials say that this concern that we are hearing about potential voter suppression is really just misinformation, because officials are quick to point out that this decision to sharply reduce the number of polling places was a bipartisan one. Both Democrats and Republicans signed off on this. And officials say that the vast majority of votes are being cast by mail-in ballot and absentee ballot. But the reality is that they now in Kentucky have a 95% fewer polling places. And I think it's important to note that many of the polling places that are left are open are not what you would normally consider, this isn't your school or your local church or library. A lot of these are very huge venues like the Kentucky Expo Center, so they can handle a lot more incoming. That said, Lindsay, when you have in many counties, in all counties, only one polling place open, that raises very serious concerns about increased travel time, increased wait times, even though so far a lot of those long lines, they have been able to speed those up. And the question is, if you are one of those voters who wasn't able to get a mail-in ballot, who wasn't able to vote absentee, and you are trying to travel to get to that polling place, what kind of an impact is this making on your ability to vote?
And Rick, let's talk quickly about the race for the White House. The president in Arizona at a mega church today, following the lower than expected turnout at his Tulsa rally this weekend. How much does it impact the president's campaign if he's not able to hold these huge rallies across the country through the summer and the fall?
Yeah, those rallies are the lifeblood of the campaign, and they have as much to do with the psychological state of the campaign, its donors, and the candidate himself as they do anything else. The president draws momentum, draws energy out of those crowds, and the fact that that arena was only about a third full, despite all the big predictions and despite his prediction that there wouldn't be an empty seat anywhere there in Oklahoma, it has an impact. And I'll tell you one immediate thing is that, while the campaign's having that event in Arizona, they're going to think long and hard before they schedule another massive MAGA-style rally like they did in Tulsa Tulsa over the weekend. They recognized that that was a miscalculation. They did not calibrate expectations appropriately. And it just may be that whatever combination of forces, whether it's pranksters and tricksters and people that were trying to force the expectations up a little bit, and just flat out concerns about COVID-19, if all of it means that the president can't fill a rally, I don't think that campaign's going to try. They had been talking for a while, Lindsay, about resuming weekly or maybe twice a week rallies. That is now on the back burner. And I think as long as the COVID-19 crisis is keeping people away from large public gatherings, indoor gatherings like the one that they put together in Tulsa, I don't think we are going to see another rally like it for a little while.
Right. And to be fair, thousands did still turn out for the president's Tulsa rally. Millions more watched it on TV and online. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has only had a handful of small public events in recent weeks. Mary, do you think that Biden can really get by with essentially laying low until his vice presidential pick in the conventions in August?
Well, that certainly is the strategy. Look, he's laying low not only because of safety and health concerns, but this is intentional by the campaign. And in speaking with them, when pressing them about whether this is really the smart or right strategy politically, they are quick to point out, well, look at the polls, which show that Joe Biden is on the rise. They are very happy right now to have Joe Biden kind of take a back seat here, because they feel that politically, the more oxygen they let Donald Trump soak up, the more that he's going to hinder his own campaign. Just take, for an example, what happened this week. The president at that Tulsa rally raising a lot of questions when he said that he intentionally slowed down testing, or tried to slow down testing. The Biden campaign was quick to pounce on that. They took the president's words, turned it around into campaign videos and ads. So Joe Biden is keeping a very close eye on Donald Trump and happy to let him have the most of the limelight right now. The question is, how long will that last? Of course, I think you are likely to see Joe Biden getting a little bit more out there on the campaign trail, but certainly he is definitely not going to be holding any big rallies anytime soon, if at all, Lindsay.
All right, Mary Bruce and Rick Klein for us in Washington. Thank you both.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
And now let's move out west. It is time for people to go home. Those were the words of the mayor of Seattle, pledging to work with community leaders to peacefully dismantle the part of the city that's still occupied by protesters, better known as CHOP. ABC's Kaylee Hartung is live on the ground in Seattle, and she joins us now with more. Kaylee, what are things like where you are right now?
Yeah, so Lindsay, it was now 2 weeks ago that Seattle police left the East Precinct just a couple blocks behind me here, and these barricades came up. But truthfully, it is hard to answer very simple questions about what is going on here, because it is a complex situation with a lot of layers to it. I was really struck when I walked up to the zone from this side and saw this list of demands here from protesters, some of whom were the first to be in these streets, saying they want the Seattle police defunded, they want that money going back to black communities, and they want all protesters freed and those charges dropped against them. There is still artwork here that reminds you why this began. You'll see this incredible Black Lives Matter mural on this street behind me here. But what we're also learning is that the violence you're hearing about happening here, the violence that the mayor is citing as the reason why the police need to come back, many people are saying we're here in a major American city. This is an imperfect society and violence and crime will happen, but because there is a spotlight on this community, on these 6 blocks, it has given the mayor reason to use that as an excuse and bring the police back here. But Lindsay, it is becoming harder and harder to find voices here who can articulate why they remain. What is clear here is that there's no leadership and there is no longer the unified message that once brought people to these streets.
And so what happens next? And how can city leaders peacefully shut this area down then?
And so that's the question that no one knows an answer to right now. As I told you, that East Precinct is just a couple blocks this way. Now, people here tell me they knew eventually the police would come back. And now the question is, you say, how will they come here and have these people leave? Well, if you look around here, look to my right here, these tents that have popped up on this park. You can hear a man playing drums he's assembled. They're behind me. Again, it's unclear who has taken hold of this space. Like I said, a complex issue with a lot of layers to it. And now when the police the police chief has said that the use of pepper spray and any chemical agents that is banned through September. Force cannot be used here. Police are only allowed to use any sort of those chemical weapons if their life is in imminent danger. So this will be a phased process. As the police chief has said, it will take days. There is no timeline. Whatever timeline they have has not been explained to us. And there are a lot of questions here. What you see right now, this atmosphere that is very calm and these streets fairly empty, that's not what we're told it looks like at night. And now that's the question, is what happens as different people move in depending on what hour of the day it is and how the police choose to meet the protesters they see.
And yeah, no longer that unified message. Okay, Kaylee Hartung, thanks so much for your reporting. And when we come back, a shocking turn. NASCAR now says Bubba Wallace was not the victim of a hate crime after a noose was found in his garage. Plus, remembering the life of Rashard Brooks, who tragically lost his life after a confrontation with police. And Bill Cosby has been granted an appeal hearing in his sexual assault case. His wife, Camille Cosby, she joins us with her reaction to that, the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot more. Stay with us.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline. Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news, and that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
Watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now.
Explosive. How will the White House and the country react to what John Bolton said about the president? What happens next? Now tomorrow, John Bolton is live and exclusive, facing the women of The View. Tomorrow on The View on ABC.
Welcome back. We turn now to the new developments in the sexual assault case against Bill Cosby. And tonight we have a rare interview with his wife, Camille Cosby. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has agreed to hear 2 arguments in Bill Cosby's appeal to overturn his 2018 conviction. Cosby is currently serving a 3 to 10-year prison sentence for 3 counts of indecent assault and battery for drugging and sexually assaulting former Temple University employee Andrea Constant back in 2004. The appeals court will consider whether it was appropriate to allow evidence of assaults against other women into a trial involving Andrea Constant. Cosby has all along maintained his innocence. His wife has stood by her husband, and over the course of their 56-year marriage, friends say that she has played a defining role in his career, including in his hit series, The Cosby Show. Camille Cosby has dedicated decades of her life to philanthropy and various issues affecting African Americans, from education to voting rights to the depiction of blacks in media and throughout history. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Cosby.
And you are welcome.
So first off, what's your reaction to today's ruling by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which gives your husband a chance to appeal his sexual assault conviction?
My first reaction is hopefulness, possibilities now. Finally, there is a court, the state's highest court, that has said, wait a minute, there are some problems here. They can be considered for an appeal. I'm very, very pleased with it's not 100%, but now I'm looking at something that is possible for vindication. That is the goal.
And how is your husband doing? How often do you all communicate? And have you gone to visit him?
We communicate every single day. My husband is doing very well. And in terms of visiting him, no. I do not want to see my husband in that kind of an environment, and he doesn't want me to see him in that kind of an environment.
And how concerned are you about him being behind bars during this coronavirus pandemic?
Very concerned. So far, he is viral-free. So if he was even outside of prison, I would have the same concerns. But, of course, the risks are greater in a prison like that.
Okay, let's go back to 1960. You were just a teen railing against inequality. What do you feel is the major difference in the struggle for equality then versus now?
I think there aren't that many differences. People have to be awake to really participate in a movement for justice in a way that is tenacious, in a way that they will not allow distractions, in a way that infiltrators are not going to be successful to weaken the movements. And as long as people stay on course, stay focused, and are fearless, all movements will eventually be successful.
And what is your message? Perhaps that's it, but to the up-and-coming activists, the young people who are on the front lines today. And what do you say to those who are marching but not registered to vote?
Now, that part I don't like, because I think the young people must read about all of the folks who died during the 60s to enable them to vote, to enable all of us to vote. They cannot think that the vote is unimportant. We need their energy. We need their intelligence within the movements that are comprised of people of different generations. But they have to be focused. You have to stick with the movement and with the goal of the movement, and let others with their agendas have their own movements to move forward, but not to weaken a strong movement like this current one. I call them revolutionaries because they are determined to deal with this issue of police brutality. And, of course, that spills over to criminal justice reform, too, because the bad cops, not all cops are bad, but the bad ones are absolutely horrific and very dangerous, as we know, and they do the dirty work for the prosecutors who are dirty and for the judges who are dirty. So they're all interconnected. And young people, please vote. That's the only way to get rid of these folks.
Shortly after your own son, Ennis, was murdered back in 1997, you wrote a letter to USA Today called "America Taught My Son's Killer to Hate Blacks." And you got a bit of pushback for that article at the time, but do you still feel that that's the case today, 23 years later, when you look at the George Floyds or Ahmaud Arbery's of today?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, the media at that time hated the fact that I wrote that article because I did highlight the history of racism in America, and that this man who came from the Ukraine learned to be a racist in America, because certainly there aren't very many black people in the Ukraine. And then to repeatedly report that this was a highway robbery, which was never true. There wasn't any robbery involved in this. This man saw a black man on the road dealing with a car that had malfunctioned, and he shot him, period. And then when he was arrested, he wrote on the walls of his cell that this is a... So that was clearly racist. This man is clearly racist. I saw a clip of a black woman who is one of the protesters in this current movement against police brutality. And she was about my age. I'm 76. And she said, I was in the 60s movement, and we're still dealing with the same issues. And it is horrific that America still is dealing with the same issues, but it is the foundation of America's history. It dates back to the enslavement of African people, and there have been humongous problems of injustice, of stereotypes to make those who are hateful free to inflict pain on those who they have projected as being subhuman. It is a horrific interconnection of these historical times pertaining to the real history of the United States of America, which is immersed in violence and bigotry and just overall hatefulness.
You know, in raising your voice to speak out on behalf of Black Lives Matter, are you concerned at all about the blowback from the Me Too movement and those who have been critical of you and feel that you're on the wrong side of history when it comes to that cause?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't care what they feel. Secondly, you know, I'm going to reference another person who is a friend of our family, and well, he's dead now, deceased, the writer James Baldwin. And I'm going to just reference one line, which I think will answer your question, and I will expound on that. But ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. And I'm going to add the word intentional. The Me Too movement and movements like them have intentional ignorance pertaining to the history of particular white women, not all white women, but particular white women who have, from the very beginning, pertaining to the enslavement of African people, accuse black males of sexual assault without any proof whatsoever, no proof anywhere on the face of the earth. And by ignoring that history, they have put out a lie in itself, and that is because I'm female, I'm telling the truth. Well, history disproves that as well. And gender has never, ever equated with truth. So they need to clean up their acts. And all of us as women who have not participated in anything nefarious, we know how women can lie. We know how they can do the same things that men do, that some men do, because there are good men and bad men. There are good women and bad women.
You have called your husband's accusers a mob of women and say that he was railroaded. What would be the motivation for dozens of women to come forward with similar accusations against your husband, accusing him of sexual assault? And also we have to be mindful that they weren't all white. I mean, there were several black women in those who came forward.
Yeah, just joining the group. But I cannot go into that because there are legal ramifications. But I can only say that there was never any proof, just a whole lot of allegations.
And I don't know if you'll want to respond, but to the critics who have accused you of victim shaming, what do you say? Because quite often in incidents of sexual assault or harassment, doctors and medical experts will say it's difficult to have proof unless you actually went to the hospital after.
I understand that, but still, among so many women who have made claims, they have not ever, none of them presented any proof, and I think that says a lot.
Want to lastly go back to, you've compared the treatment of your husband to the murder of Emmett Till, obviously the black teen who was murdered for allegedly whistling at a white woman, and that was later debunked as a false claim by the woman herself. What's the parallel?
The parallel is that the same age-old thing about particular white women making accusations against black men that are unproven. Emmett Till's outcome to mutilate his body in the way that it was just really so deeply horrendous. There isn't, I mean, there's a lack of words for that kind of hatefulness. But see, years ago, I interviewed the survivors from the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots in 1921. And that was another case of a white female making a claim, a sexual assault claim against a black male, which we all know, if we know about the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots, and gave license to mobs of white people converging on a very independent, economically independent, educationally independent black community named Greenwood in Tulsa. And hundreds of people were killed. But these unproven allegations, it doesn't even fit in with laws in our country. You've got to prove stuff. My husband was under the scrutiny of several federal entities during the time of Nixon's presidency. He was on that infamous Nixon's list. But for 4 years, he was harassed by the Internal Revenue, by the FBI, and all that. If he had done all those things these women are claiming, certainly it would have come out then. And in this country, it is impossible for any black man, I don't care how much money he has, how popular it is, to get away with raping a white woman. That is just absolutely impossible.
So you boil this all down to racism. You feel that if your husband were not a black man, that these accusations would not have been made and he would not be in prison?
Oh, I don't know that, because some white men have. I mean, like, you know, there are some who have been sent to prison, but it's not the same situation as the history of particular white women with black men. We've seen them hanging from trees once they make those accusations. We've seen them being incarcerated once those accusations are made, and once again, unproven.
Mrs. Cosby, thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, too. Bye-bye, Ms. Davis.
Up next, we heard it again today on Capitol Hill. More testing is needed for the U.S. to reopen safely. We take a closer look at where we are and where we need to be. Plus, we talk to the future phenom who actually inspired Greta Thunberg to become an activist. Her message to young people everywhere across the country. And our tweet of the day. Happy birthday to Alan Turing, born on this day in 1912. We'll be right back.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
Welcome back, everyone. We turn now to the issue of COVID-19 testing. Today, the nation's top health officials told lawmakers we need more testing and that they've never been told to slow it down, despite the president's recent comments to that effect. So we take a closer look at where we really are when it comes to testing by the numbers. The U.S. has now conducted 28.1 million COVID-19 tests since the pandemic began. And we're now testing about 500,000 people a day. That's 2 times as many tests per day as in early May and 4 times as many compared to early April. That's according to the COVID Tracking Project. But experts still say that this falls short of what's needed. Harvard's Global Health Institute estimated that we need 900,000 tests per day before it's safe to reopen. And the Rockefeller Foundation says about 4 million tests per day are needed, a goal that it calls bold and ambitious, but achievable. In Phoenix, Arizona, a state where COVID cases are rapidly increasing, residents told ABC News that they waited in line for up to 10 hours for a COVID test over the weekend. But testing may ramp up. Today, one official testified that the U.S. should be able to conduct up to 50 million tests per month by early fall. And when we come back, millions of Americans have been forced to turn their living room or bedroom into an office because of the pandemic. But is working from home actually working? We take a closer look at the future of the home office. Plus, rapper T.I. joins us to talk about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and his own work on criminal justice reform. But first, here's some of the trending stories on abcnews.com.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqi 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home. David, nice to meet you. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. No bull, no spin. Now imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward.
ABC News, straightforward. Unthinkable. 2 babies switched at birth.
This was no accident.
Now Friday, stunning details. The 2020 event, Friday at 9, 8 Central on ABC.
More than half the states of the U.S. now seeing a rise in coronavirus infections. An analysis by ABC News found increases in hospitalizations in 21 states and increases in daily deaths in at least 8 states.
In other areas of the country, we're now seeing a disturbing surge of infections.
Federal health officials in charge of leading the nation's response to the pandemic testifying on Capitol Hill today, warning we aren't entering a second wave because we never got out of the first.
We are still in the middle of the first wave. So before you start talking about what a second wave is, what we'd like to do is to get this outbreak under control.
Meanwhile, Dr. Fauci did provide one piece of good news. When it comes to a possible vaccine, he said one is ready to enter phase 3 of testing and that several are being developed so they can immediately be administered once they are approved.
There's a reasonably good chance that by the very beginning of 2021, that if we're going to have a vaccine, that we will have it by then.
A powerful earthquake hitting southern Mexico. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates it was a 7.4 magnitude quake. There are reports it caused buildings to sway in Mexico City, sending people running into the streets. It was also felt in central Mexico and Guatemala. Mexico's president says it's too soon to know the extent of the damage.
While former Trump advisor Roger Stone looks to delay his prison sentence for in part lying to the FBI, a disturbing claim coming to light. The former prosecutor in that case plans to tell Congress there was political pressure to go easy on Stone. In prosecutor Aaron Zielinski's prepared testimony obtained by ABC News, he says, quote, "What I heard repeatedly was that Roger Stone was being treated differently from any other defendant because of his relationship to the president." Zielinski goes on to say the person in charge of the U.S. Attorney's Office at the time was, quote, "receiving heavy pressure from the highest levels of the Department of Justice to cut Stone a break." Stone has been sentenced to 40 months in prison. L.A. County prosecutors have charged adult film star Ron Jeremy with raping 3 women and sexually assaulting a 4th. Prosecutors say one of those alleged incidents took place in 2014 at a home, while another took place in 2017 at a bar, and last year at that same bar. If convicted, the charges against the 67-year-old could potentially result in him living out the rest of his days behind bars.
A bizarre twist tonight in the case of an alleged hate crime against NASCAR's only full-time black race car driver, Bubba Wallace. Drivers rallied around Wallace, showing their support ahead of yesterday's race at Talladega after a noose was found in his team's garage. But now NASCAR is saying that the FBI has concluded there was no crime committed at all. ABC's Victor Oquendo has those details.
Tonight, the Justice Department announcing no federal crime was committed after an apparent noose was found hanging inside NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace's garage. He's the circuit's only full-time black driver. A member of his team found the rope hanging Sunday at Talladega, an area restricted to only essential personnel, NASCAR stepping up security for Wallace. The FBI reviewing evidence, finding the noose was in that garage as early as October 2019, adding nobody could have known Mr. Wallace would be assigned to garage number 4 last week. What appeared to be a hate-fueled act led to an incredible show of solidarity. Before the race Monday, drivers and pit crews from every team marching along with Wallace's number 43 car, Wallace clearly emotional. It's been about 2 weeks since Wallace pushed NASCAR to ban the Confederate flag from all races and events, something Brad Doherty, one of NASCAR's few black team owners, says signals a new age for the sport.
If you're not a part of this movement, you're going to be left in the wake. And NASCAR has taken a huge stance on changing a lot of things, the perception of NASCAR over the last, 5 decades and how people view the sport, what they think of the sport. This is unprecedented, and this is huge.
And while there's been an outpouring of support, there's also been opposition. Confederate flags spotted outside the superspeedway, and even one flying above with the words reading, "Defund NASCAR." Today on The View, Wallace said he never imagined being an activist, but recent events led him to speak out.
Racism is a problem from every aspect of life, and we have to work so hard to get that to change, and we know it's not going to change overnight.
A sign of that change? These new fans after the race, all of them wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts.
First times right here from Atlanta. That is so cool. The sport is changing.
Our thanks to Victor for that update. And as you know, personally, sitting at home, the pandemic has changed so many aspects of our lives, especially the way we work. Even as the country reopens, many Americans are still working from home and plan to do so for the foreseeable future. But as we get used to this new normal, is the great work from home experiment actually working? ABC's Ariel Reshef has a closer look.
Working from home, it's the culture shift few saw coming. For so many Americans, commuting over the past few months has consisted of taking those few steps to the couch or the kitchen table. The COVID-19 pandemic creating a new paradigm of professional life. But will it fundamentally change the way we all do business for the foreseeable future?
This pandemic has forced this great work from home experiment. How do you think it's going so far?
I think it's going a heck of a lot better than anybody anticipated it would.
A realization real estate mogul and Shark Tank guru Barbara Corcoran says is likely to outlast the current crisis.
This is my work day it starts here and ends here, and my life's with my family starts here. I think that blending of lines and the constant intrusion of emails, text, both work and personally related, blending together is a difficult challenge for people. But I think, too, I really think that people are going to come out of this long term. Maybe I'm convincing myself of this, but I feel so myself. A greater sense of what's important in life.
Do you believe the screen is a barrier to productivity, or can it actually spur some kind of creativity?
Yeah, a lot of good creative thinking can happen on Zoom. I frankly don't think I'll ever return to face-to-face brainstorming because personalities get involved. But when you're just throwing out one idea out of another and every idea is equal, you get tremendous focus and tremendous generation of new ideas. No, I love that part. I'm not leaving it.
And plenty of companies are thinking the same way. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, and Zillow, all extending work-from-home options for employees. Visa, Spotify, and Shopify are letting people work from home through at least the end of the year. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey going a step further, telling staff they'd be allowed to work from home forever if they choose. And Facebook with its 50,000 plus workers following suit. CEO Mark Zuckerberg announcing the company is planning for some to permanently work from home. But there's a catch. Employee salaries are likely to change to match local costs of living, which may make people think twice before moving out of state. But what about those who can't work from home?
Of course, it's easy for white-collar workers who can work online to say, don't work here, work at home. It's very different that if you're working in a restaurant and you're serving somebody their meal, vastly different. You can't work at home. These people that are keeping things going, at least with a semblance of normality, are really our heroes.
For many other companies, the return to the physical office, whenever it happens, may not be full-time. According to a recent survey, 49% of Americans say they would feel comfortable returning to their regular routine today, which is up from 41% in May. 50% say they would not feel comfortable, down from 58% in May. And of those 50%, a majority say they won't be able to resume their regular routines at all this year. But for those who will be returning, what might you find when you get there? Real estate company Cushman & Wakefield understands it goes beyond just physically going into the office.
Physically, you're going back to the same building and the same workstation, but the environment that you came from is going to be very different. That's something companies understand, many already adapting. Huge focus on the individual journey of each person and making sure it's a safe and it's a healthy experience, reducing the number of touch points, de-densifying spaces, and then providing an environment where people feel relaxed and able to be sort of productive. But even with all those changes, Corcoran says vast corporate office space and campuses may be a thing of the past.
The people who finance office space are in for a day of reckoning. Because no way is the office space ever going to be what it was before. Everyone's going to be shrinking their offices. And a lot of people think, oh, they'll give more space per worker. No, there's not going to be a lot of workers at work anymore.
Ariel Reshef, ABC News, New York.
The deaths of Rashard Brooks, George Floyd, and a litany of African Americans known and unknown at the hands of police have reignited a firestorm of protests across the country, notably in Atlanta, where Brooks was killed. The city is also home to Tip Harris, a.k.a. the rapper T.I., who joins us now. T.I., it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for talking with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, you attended the funeral of Rashard Brooks just today and George Floyd's funeral 2 weeks ago. Why was it so important for you to be there in person? And how has all of this affected you as a black man and as a parent?
I mean, deeply sad and heavily impacted by the travesties that continue to replicate themselves in our communities at the hands of policemen, the lack thereof.
We've heard protesters using the slogan, say their names, and you do just that in your new song, They Don't, with Nasty C referencing George Floyd, Emmett Till, and Sandra Bland, among others. Let's take a listen.
How could you blame as many sisters and brothers die? If they answer to it, go and start another fight. Get they got to do it, has to show objection to it. God bless them, no direction, not they getting to it. 2020, guess it's the year to burn. Consequences you earn. To build this nation that you hate me in, the karma's return. Well, that's a stupid question. When will you learn? You never will. Word to George Floyd, Emmett Till, and Sean Ben. Well, after that, here's to getting exactly what you expect. How you supposed to serve and protect.
I want to say that seeing a police station go up in smoke felt like vindication. Is that the kind of vindication that we need right now? What is the message that you hope people will take away from this song?
I don't like to, as an artist, it's not my job to give people the message to take away from it. You know what I'm saying? I think once you listen to it and once I've kind of conveyed my messaging and shared my energy, how you perceive it, that's an independent effort. That's not nothing that I can guide or direct. Now, as far as is that the vindication we need, I think that this is a time, it's extremely unique, okay? And you must consider that the what we're fighting against is extreme in itself. So that's not an easy answer. I think it's going to take a multifaceted approach to deal with such a diverse set of problems like we have. I think that what the vindication we truly need is justice for the families of the slain and accountability to the officers that patrol our communities and attacking the impunity that they operate under.
And I know you're working with Clark Atlanta University on a unique business class. What can you tell us about that class?
Well, the class will be about the business and the culture of trap music. And trap music, you know, is a derivative of the war on drugs, the Contra scandal, the crack era. And it has kind of morphed itself into a new generation of the opioid crisis. So as long as this country finds itself in a position where it is pushing drugs in the communities of its citizens, whether it's, once again, through the Contra scandal and funneling crack to all of the inner city areas, and then, you know, making the laws more stringent for crack rather than cocaine, which is really entrapment. So you have that, okay, and then, or whether you have an opioid crisis and the pharmaceuticals and you know, prescription drugs are running rampant in other communities. As long as this country perpetuates crises like this, there will always be a need for trap music. There will always be people who relate to trap music.
And speaking of trap music, I mean, you're really a study in public evolution. We've watched you grow from the father of trap music to a huge civic voice and thought partner in these crucial times. Curious to get personal with you for a minute. What would you say has been the biggest influence on your own personal growth?
My children. I think my children are the biggest influence on my personal growth, because as I get older, they get older. Okay, and you see the world through a different set of eyes when you're looking at a world that your child has to exist in without your protection. You know, when my oldest daughter started driving, which was, you know, quite some time ago, that kind of made me want to do more to affect the world that she would be out independently living in. And the same, and as my other kids get older and go off to college and get their own apartments and, you know, have more of an opportunity to be pulled over by policemen or have more of an opportunity to run independently into a white supremacist or any of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? All of these things create a genuine passion for me to want to use my influence and platform to do more to affect the world that they're living in.
All right, well, T.I., we thank you so much for what you're doing, and we thank you for your time tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Up next, the story of the future phenom who inspired Greta Thunberg and her message to young people across the country.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Explosive. How will the White House and the country react to what John Bolton said about the president? What happens next? Now tomorrow, John Bolton is live and exclusive, facing the women of The View. Tomorrow on The View on ABC.
ABC News honored winner of 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the most prestigious honor, Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news choice. Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news, and that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
Watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now.
Welcome back. This Pride Month, GLAAD released its first ever list of LGBTQ change makers, 20 and younger, who are making huge strides in social justice. Meet the future phenom who inspired a climate justice revolution and is paving a way for others like her.
You know, I always say I was born caring.
At just 18, Jamie Margolin's already figured out how to make waves by channeling her passion for climate change into major action.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Jamie isn't just waiting for change, she's on the front lines of creating it, fighting to make a difference on climate change.
Back in 2017, and laid the groundwork for what is now known as the modern youth climate movement.
She's already created a book and an organization.
I am an author of a new book called Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It. And I'm also a co-founder of the International Youth Climate Justice organization called 0 Hour. And we are a space for especially like young women is who runs the show in 0 Hour. So it's a space for people who maybe didn't at first feel at home in the environmental movement to have a place where they can lead.
While she's still a teenager, she already has the credentials of a seasoned activist. She's organized major rallies, campaigned with Bernie Sanders, spoken at major engagements around the world, won significant awards, and even testified before Congress with fellow environmental activist Greta Thunberg.
It is right here testifying before you that I'm proud to announce that history is being made. You've heard of the Reagan era, the New Deal era. Well, the youth are bringing about the era of the Green New Deal. That was truly incredible, and I did that alongside Greta, which was also great because we had been like pen pals online since long before people knew who she was.
And now, Jamie's been named to GLAAD's inaugural 20 Under 20 class, a group of bright and determined changemakers in the LGBTQ community, lending their voices to advancing various social justice causes.
Jamie stands out because of all the work she's done on climate justice. She's identified as lesbian. She's out there on the forefront with her voice, using her platforms, connecting, creating real change. And I think, like so many young kids, Jamie felt frustrated by seeing no action by leadership, by the older generation, and took matters into her own hands. And that has been really refreshing for someone like me, who is a social justice advocate, to see this next generation of leaders come up is just, it's really heartwarming.
Jamie says the recognition marks a full circle moment in her life.
This means so much to me because, you know, they're specifically honoring LGBTQ plus youth. And for the first 16 years of my life, me being a lesbian was my deepest, darkest secret that I hated about myself. And it was just, you know, I thought I was broken for not liking boys.
And that self-acceptance is deeply felt in her work. Jamie uses her platform to be the role model she says she never had.
The reason why I went through so much anguish and hurt in my life is because I didn't have any representation and I didn't see anyone like me. And so as I started to gain a platform from my activism, I started to speak a bunch on social media about being queer, about issues, about representation.
She hopes to inspire a generation of activists to make a difference and make their voices heard.
What I tell young people who are just, down on themselves is that age isn't a factor. It's just like, do you care about something? Do what you can with what you have to change it. I'm just a girl from Seattle who decided to make a change with what I had. And then what I had grew as I grew more. And so I would just say, find something that you care about, that really makes you tick, that really is like, I genuinely care about this and this affects me.
As for Jamie's next step, she's heading to college with dreams to expand LGBTQ inclusion in the mainstream.
I just graduated high school like a month or two ago, online of course, and I'm going to college and I'm going to film school because I want to work in media to create movies and shows and all that stuff that feature girls like me, so no one else has to turn on the TV and see no one who looks like them, no one who loves like them and feel so alone. And I don't ever want anyone to feel like I did.
Representation matters indeed. And before we go tonight, the image of the day. Make like a tree and listen. This was the first performance at a concert hall in Barcelona since the pandemic. Still, no people allowed, but a rather green audience. Nearly 3,000 plants filled the seats and set the scene for the musicians on stage. Those plants will be out in the sunlight again soon when they're donated to a nearby hospital. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and good night.